From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We are now in Bab el-Azazia, specifically at the main gate of Bab el-Azazia. The revolutionaries, with God's blessings, entered with full confidence and determination to uproot this tyrant.
Libyan rebels capture Gaddafi's main compound in Tripoli, while the Libyan leader vows to fight on. We'll go to London to speak with Jaber Ashkar, and we'll go to Tripoli. Then, understanding 9/11, we'll look at the first online library of global TV news coverage of the 9/11 attacks and their aftermath. It's being launched today. We'll be joined by digital archivist Rick Prelinger and Brewster Kahle, who's also trying to preserve a physical copy of every book ever published.
Universal access to all knowledge, I think it can be one of the greatest achievements of humankind, like the man on the moon or the Gutenberg Bible or the Library of Alexandria.
All that more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi is vowing to fight on, even though NATO-backed forces have seized control of much of Tripoli, including Gaddafi's main compound. But in a defiant message to supporters, Gaddafi vowed last night martyrdom or victory and urged loyalists to fight the rebels. Gaddafi's whereabouts remain unknown, his powerful sons unaccounted for, despite rebel claims the sons had been seized. United Nations Libyan envoy Ibrahim Dabashi praised the rebel advances.
The regime of Gaddafi has already fallen. It doesn't exist since the last 2 days, because none of the Gaddafi regime institutions was working during the last days. It is only a few high officials who are escaping from place to another inside Tripoli, and they are struggling to keep themselves safe.
While supporters of the rebels have held celebrations across Libya, many analysts say the fighting could continue for weeks or months. Many questions remain unanswered about who controls Libya's vast armed depots. Meanwhile, more evidence is coming to light about how NATO troops played a key role in the rebel offensive. The Associated Press reports covert teams from France, Britain, and some East European states provided critical assistance. Foreign military advisors on the ground provided key real-time intelligence to the rebels, enabling them to maximize their limited firepower. One U.S. official said the Qatari military led the way, augmented later by French, Italian, and British military advisors. Armed U.S. Predator drones also helped clear a path for the rebels to advance. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has been kicked off a 50-state task force negotiating a possible settlement with the nation's largest mortgage companies. The move came just a day after the New York Times reported the Obama administration's pressuring Schneiderman to agree to a broad state settlement with banks over questionable foreclosure tactics. The federal settlement has been widely criticized because it would insulate the nation's largest banks, including Bank of America, Citigroup, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo, from all criminal investigations in exchange for civil fines. Schneiderman, who's leading his own investigation into the mortgage industry, has said he opposes any deal that gives participating banks a release from other litigation surrounding their mortgage activities. New York State Supreme Court Justice Michael Obis dismissed all charges against former IMF chief Dominique StraussKahn at the request of prosecutors Tuesday. StraussKahn was arrested in May on allegations of sexually assaulting a hotel maid in New York. The charges were dropped even though forensic tests found unambiguous evidence of a sexual encounter between StraussKahn and the woman, Nafissatou Diallo, an immigrant from the African nation of Guinea. After the court hearing, StraussKahn's lawyer praised the decision.
You can engage in inappropriate behavior, perhaps, but that is much different than a crime. And this case was treated as a crime when it was not. And finally, I'd like to say this, and I'd like to say it publicly, and I say it proudly. Today is an extraordinary day, and it's an extraordinary event to have a district attorney stand up in a public courtroom and dismiss an indictment concluding that the complaining witness is not worthy of belief. I've practiced in this city for 35 years. I don't think I've ever seen that post-indictment. So I give Cy Vance a great deal of credit.
Nafissatou Diallo's lawyer, Kenneth Thompson, told reporters prosecutors would have pushed ahead with the case if the defendant had not been such a powerful and famous person.
District Attorney Vance has abandoned an innocent woman and has denied an innocent woman a right to get justice in a rape case. And by doing so, he has also abandoned other women who will be raped in the future or sexually assaulted.
The district attorney's news conference was cut short when a 5.8 magnitude earthquake shook the room in New York, causing reporters to flee out of the building.
For generations, this standard has protected. Okay. So, no, okay. I've been through earthquakes in Seattle.
People started to flee the news conference. The epicenter of the 5.8 magnitude earthquake was in Virginia, but shook much of the East Coast from Georgia to Canada. Scientists said it was the largest quake on the East Coast since World War II. No serious injuries were reported, but cracks appeared in the Washington Monument and the National Cathedral. The epicenter of the earthquake was located just 10 miles from a nuclear power plant that has lacked seismographs since the 1990s. The North Anna Power Station lost off-site power and was using diesel generators to maintain cooling operations at its 2 nuclear reactors following the quake. The facility, which was built on a fault line, is only designed to withstand an earthquake between a magnitude of 5.9 and 6.1. Yesterday's quake registered 5.8. All the plant's seismographs were removed in the 90s due to budget cuts. Federal officials said a total of 6 nuclear plants from North Carolina to Michigan are under increased scrutiny after the earthquake. Meanwhile, earthquakes have also been reported in Colorado and California over the past 24 hours. The military contractor KBR is seeking $2 million in legal fees from a former employee who sued the company, accusing her KBR co-workers of drugging and gang raping her in Iraq in 2005. Last March, a jury rejected a lawsuit by the former worker, Jamie Lee Jones. KBR, a former subsidiary of Halliburton, now wants Jones to pay for its legal fees and court costs. Jones' attorney, Todd Kelly, said, quote, "This is an attempt by KBR to chill other people from bringing claims against them." In education news, a group of parents in the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey have sued the city of Newark over a $100 million donation from Facebook. The lawsuit's demanding the release of correspondence between Newark and company executives, as well as other key players, in the effort to overhaul the public education system. The parents group says it wants to make sure public officials, rather than private individuals, are deciding how to allocate the donated funds. In other education news, New York City Education Department has announced plans to cut nearly 780 employees by October. It's the largest layoff in a New York agency since Mayor Michael Bloomberg took office in 2002. In news from Africa, the Parliament of South Sudan has called for security forces to be deployed to stop revenge killings after recent clashes over cattle killed at least 600 people. Hilda Johnson is a United Nations representative to the newly independent state of South Sudan.
It was a retaliatory attack of a significant scale with, we estimate but not confirmed, around 600, maybe more killed, and much more than that wounded. We're deeply concerned about this because there's also now a risk of another retaliation from the community that received this attack now and was affected. So we're now in a situation where we can see a cycle of violence escalating, and this cycle now has to stop.
In news from Latin America, Chile's largest union coalition has called for a 2-day nationwide strike for today and tomorrow. Protesters are calling for a rewriting of Chile's dictatorship-era constitution, as well as pension reforms, a new labor code, and more health care spending. For months, Chilean students have boycotted classes to demand a free quality education as a right for all citizens. Some students, including Matias Ortega, have been on a hunger strike for over a month.
We've been going for 35 days. The government has not given a response good enough for us to stop, and our bodies are exhausted.
For more on the Chilean strike, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. In news from Mississippi, Johnny Dupree has become the first African-American in modern history to win a major party nomination for Mississippi governor. Dupree is the mayor of Hattiesburg. He won the Democratic gubernatorial runoff primary on Tuesday. Mississippi has not elected any African-American candidates to statewide office since Reconstruction. Dupree will face off against Republican Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant in November. A new report finds Native Americans and Alaska Natives are the U.S. group most detrimentally impacted by climate change. According to the National Wildlife Federation, a dependence on natural resources to sustain economic and cultural practices, lagging infrastructure, and a profound lack of financial and technical resources has placed Native Americans at an increased risk. The report finds severe weather linked to climate change, such as drought, wildfires, and snowstorms, disproportionately harms the already vulnerable Native communities. The Canadian actors Margot Kidder and Tantu Cardinal were among 60 protesters arrested on Tuesday for taking part in a sit-in outside the White House calling on the Obama administration to reject the Keystone XL pipeline, a proposed 1,500-mile pipeline to deliver tar sands oil from Canada to refineries in Texas. 220 people have been arrested since Saturday when the sit-in began. The protest is expected to continue for another 10 days. You can see our ongoing coverage at democracynow.org. In other pipeline news, ExxonMobil's estimating the recent oil pipeline spill in Montana will cost the company $42 million. Over 1,000 workers have been at the site to help clean up the estimated 1,000 barrels of crude oil that spilled into the Yellowstone River. In campaign news, Salon.com has revealed a foreign policy advisor to Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney has been active in recent months in an advocacy campaign supporting a designated foreign terrorist organization from Iran. Romney's advisor, Mitchell Reese, has played a leading role in an ongoing campaign to get the Mujahideen Ikhaq, or MEK, removed from the U.S. government's official list of terrorist organizations. In TV news, the legendary broadcaster Bill Moyers is returning to the airwaves with a new weekly show called Moyers & Company. American Public Television will distribute the show. That's because earlier this year, PBS told Moyers the network didn't have an appropriate time slot for his program. Meanwhile, MSNBC has announced the Reverend Al Sharpton will be the full-time host of its new daily program, Politics Nation. Some critics of Sharpton have pointed out his selection for the job comes just months after he publicly supported the $30 billion merger of NBC and Comcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.